man called Dundalk Singh, who was the Attorney General. But a couple of weeks ago, Julia Alexander and I, we caught up with her in London. Let's have a look at what Gina said. Can we drop the lights as well?
My name is Gina Miller, and I've come to prominence, if you like, in the UK, in that I brought probably the biggest constitutional case in UK law for 200 years, in that I took the government to court to remind them that they couldn't bypass Parliament when it came to triggering Article 50 to leave the European Union.
Now you're here now, you're very well known, you're probably not
You're here?
but you're early were in Guyana. Just tell me a little bit about you yourself, growing up in Guyana, your family, your
I have the fondest of memories of growing up in Guyana, just because of not just because of the open air and the freedom that I had as a child. And I remember things like the smell of the mango tree, or sitting on the white bench when my dad came home from work and would brush my hair, and us talking about politics. In that I was very fortunate, and I grew up in a house where we spoke about everything. We discussed not just academia, because obviously good old Guyana, education was everything. My brother went to Queen's College and I went to St. Gabriel's. But we talked. I think I was very fortunate with both my parents in that they were very worldly and had a real strong sense of community and justice and right and wrong. So from the earliest of ages, we talked about those things as a family around the table, as I said, in the garden, on the hammock in the balcony. We would talk about what was going on in the papers. We would be talking about what was happening at Burnham House and all the things we remember, and Viola and her whole let's make new products to boost Guyana, all those sorts of things. As little children, because I'm one of 5, we talked about very openly as a family, and I valued that. And it's very much something that I think empowered me to be the person I am today. But I think there was something in the water in Guyana. I think there's something about Guyanese women, in that our strength of personality and our strength of character and our bravery, if you like, comes from being able to combine our heads and our hearts, and being able to think in a very lateral way and be, if you like, hard-nosed when it needs to be and soft when we need to be. And that's something that as I say, I value from my mother, my parenting, but I think just something about Guyana, it was just there in the water.
Tell me about little Gina. Was the Brexit Queen there at all? You said you were one of 5,
Yes. It's interesting when people say, how did I become this brave person I am today, nature and nurture? I think it's a bit of both, in that I was always somebody who didn't just take the path. 3, 4 years old, at our front gate, there used to be kids in the street playing, and I remember my mum used to get very cross with me because they thought I lost everything at school, my shoes, my clothes, my suits, whatever. But I didn't. I couldn't understand why I had it and they didn't, so I'd be giving them away. And we had licks in those days. We would get in trouble for doing that. And I never told my parents until I was an adult that that's what I was doing, because I just thought it was wrong. So I think this sense of justice that I've had, a really gut instinct for right and wrong and for wanting to help other people, that's who I've always been.
You spent your formative years here in the UK, and obviously now that you're still going to Brexit, you need to know and level here. But what about Guyana? What's the connection that you still have there?
Well, when my father was alive, I still had a very strong connection with Guyana, and I have from the interior, in that I've taken my family over quite a few times now, and we go and see, we've been to see Dan Turk, we've been to see the otters, we go and see the lilies and the ponds, and we've gone to see the Amerindian villages, because I want them to know the heart and soul of Guyana. I have to say, when I'm in Georgetown, I don't really recognize it. It's not the place that I remember growing up. The thing I feel sad about is that intellectually there isn't the real strength of learning that I thought Guyana was so famous for, and actually I benefit from, and my family benefited from, my siblings did, is that I don't see that same sort of hunger for learning and hunger for wanting to do something and do the right thing. And that I feel is a shame. I think it's probably gone, for my liking, far too commercial. We're being driven by money and profit rather than people.
Now you're shaping up the establishment here and the movement here. What would you do? how would you shake up Ghana?
Oh, shaking up Ghana, that's an interesting one. I think when a country is wounded by division, and that's division in its people, you have to create a different sort of narrative, which is as a one of inclusiveness, and one of how do we put our country and our future and our children first, and not the color of our skin or the religion with which we practice in our homes. I think that message of healing and the country and what we can achieve together would be a powerful message I would probably like to write about more in Ghana and talk about and say that maybe other people could talk about.
Now this huge Diaspora conference is currently on here in Guyana. Is it something that you can think about returning to Guyana to help somebody rebuilding?
I've looked at some of the projects in the interior, and I've looked at some of the projects in the homes and some of the children's homes. And I have to say, what puts me off is either the bureaucracy or the inability to understand that it needs to be everybody together. The collaboration that needs to be there to solve problems is something I see a bit of a pushback, and I've experienced myself when I've sought to, and this idea, again, going back to my thing about money, it's what's in it for me. Helping other people, what's in it for you is to make you feel better, that you've left a mark in the world, not for you to feel better because you profited from it. And so if I felt that there was a genuine turning point in the emotion and the consciousness of Ghana, I'd be far more committed to it. But I don't feel it's there right now.
At the moment, the crown you're wearing is the Brexit Queen. Is that your last legacy, or is there something more to tell?
Well, I've been a transparency campaigner in the UK for nearly a decade now. I've taken on the city and all the ills that led to the financial services crisis in 2008, 2009. I've done the same in the charity sector. I'm very critical about the lack of scrutiny and accountability in the third sector. But Brexit was just, it brought me to the fore, but it doesn't define me. What I believe defines me is the ability to stand up and speak out and use my voice and my actions and my conscience when I see something is wrong. I'm not afraid to stand up and ask the awkward questions, and I will carry on doing so, because globally and from a democratic point of view, I think we are in trouble. And we need brave people throughout the world to just stand up and ask very simple, honest questions.
You are clearly a very brave woman, because you've had to put some really nasty press, some really nasty trolls, and some things that most people would not have to do, which all mind you mentioned some of that just so briefly. Where's the strength coming from?
People ask me where my strength comes from. I just can't imagine being any other way. And I don't see it as strength. I think it's my weaknesses and my flaws that makes me who I am. Because I know my limits, but I know what I can also achieve. But I think sometimes if you only see one side of your character, it limits what you can do. I know my warts and flaws and all. Therefore, I know where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. And one of the strengths I have is the fact that I don't care what other people think about me. If I think I'm doing something for the right reason, I will stand up, because I want someone to knock me down if they have an answer to me. They can tell me I'm wrong for whatever reason. I dare to challenge them to knock me down. And they don't tend to. What they do is attack me personally, and then I know I'm right. Because if you don't have an intellectual answer to my question, and the only answer you have is a personal attack, then I'm asking the right question. So I have an ability to turn things around as well. But some of the abuse has shocked me. It's not the Britain I thought I lived in. The racist abuse, the misogynistic abuse, the fact that as a coloured woman I have no right to speak, I have no right to ask questions. I can obviously only successful because I married a rich man. How could I possibly be bright enough or strong enough to be successful in business? All of these are myths that I thought we had dismissed. And every part of my life has been ransacked. My business has been attacked. My family, my children are threatened. I now live under security. I don't go out very much, but these are all prices worth paying, because hopefully the world becomes a better place from where we're going for my children. If I can help a little bit of sunshine break through the clouds, then that's the place I can leave, knowing that my children, my grandchildren, will be able to go out and walk in that sunshine.
Thank you.
There we go. Great. She's like one of the fellow Guyanese. Very, very brave woman. Very rich woman, by the way, Vice Chancellor. So you perhaps should tap her up. Her husband made a lot of money in the city, and they have a Mayfair office. But she's brave. When she was interviewed by Trevor Phillips at my commission, Trevor Phillips said, "Gina, aren't you what the Guyanese call an own way person?" And she said, "Yes, I am. But if you see her, you see her father. You see Dunlop in her. But the best known Guyanese, now, before her, the other best known Guyanese in England and indeed in the world was Valerie Amos, Baroness Amos, Labour Cabinet Minister, people like Sutton, go back to Phil, Labour Cabinet Minister, Under Secretary General of the United Nations, Chairman of the Equal Opportunities Commission, now she's Principal of SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies. Valerie's been prominent for 20 years in Britain. She is one of the founders of the Guyanese Mafia, and she actually likes the term, so she doesn't like, so we use it loosely. I'm going to talk about Guyanese Mafia later on. Last week, this time last week, Valerie did a conversation again with Julian Alexander at the Guyana High Commission. And here it is, 10 minutes of it here.
Valerie Amos, Baroness Amos. I'm currently director, so I'm still
Excellent. Are you also one of the most famous Guyanese rivers in the UK? Tell us one.
Well, if you say so,
Yes,
Juliet. I have been a member of the British Cabinet. In fact, I was the first black woman in a British cabinet. I've been a senior official at the United Nations. I've represented Britain as High Commissioner to Australia. So I've had a rather varied and interesting career.
When you say interesting, is it something that you lie awake at night and think, bloody hell?
No, not at all. And I don't think that anybody who is seen as being successful really does that. I mean, I'm someone who I feel very strongly that I've taken opportunities that have been presented to me. I've had a lot of people that have supported me and looked out for me along the way. And my focus always is on what I'm doing and how I can do the best I can in the job that I'm in. And I think that it's really hard sometimes to actually appreciate and understand the extent to which people feel that I have achieved so much, because I feel just like Valerie Amos that left Guyana when she was 9 and arrived in the UK. I feel like a regular person, and I hope I am.
I think we know you are. Tell us a little bit about Valerie Amos in Guyana. What was life like for you? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Wakenham, a tiny island in the mouth of the Essequibo River, so I'm a real country girl, and it was one of those magical childhoods that you think about when you look back on your childhood. It always seems very magical and wonderful. Of course, there were lots of bits that weren't so magical, in the sense that we were very much a community, so the children grew up in that community atmosphere. So it meant that every single adult felt that they had the right not just to tell your parents about you, but to chastise you if they found you doing anything wrong. So, but there was the love as well as the discipline. And Guyana is so extraordinarily beautiful. And of course, that's something that I really only discovered and understood when I went back as an adult. But you know, as a child, having the freedom to roam. My parents were both teachers, and my mother used to teach me, and anybody who had a mother teach them in Guyana knows that that is not easy. So that bit wasn't easy, but I'm very academically minded, so that bit was okay, although not the parts when she wanted to find out why you hadn't come top in class.
So was there a lot of pressure as you were growing up?
There was pressure, but I don't think I felt it as pressure. I felt it as wanting us to be successful. I felt it was very much about building our confidence, about expectations being high, but not in a negative way, a kind of sense that you could do anything you wanted if you stuck to education, did the best that you could, got the qualifications, and then went out into the world.
Now, I know that you've been involved, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment, with the Amos bursary.
Yes.
Actually, no, let's talk about it now, because some of you here may not know about it. And that was, as we're talking about your parents, that was something that you basically took on because, in memory of your parents who were educators.
Yes, they were both educators. They died very close to each other in 2008. In fact, 9 days apart. I still find it hard to talk about, so if I break down, forgive me. My mother died on the morning of my dad's funeral. Literally, we were preparing for his funeral and she passed away. And we were trying to think afterward. I mean, it was traumatic for us. It was what they would have wanted. They were so close. But we're a very close-knit family, so it was really, really hard. And then we were trying to think about, but what could we do in their memory? And we said to friends and family, forget about the flowers, we're not quite so sure what we're going to do, but we will do something. Education's always been important in our family. So on my mother's side, my grandfather was a headmaster. My father was a teacher and remained a teacher here in the UK up until the time that he retired. My sister started her life as a teacher. My nephew is currently a teacher. So education is very, very important in our family. And we did what our parents, particularly my father, had always taught us to do, which was to look at the data, look at the evidence. And we saw when we looked at the data that young black men of African Caribbean heritage, even if they had the ability to get to university, very often fell away during that first year. And in fact, they had the highest dropout rates. And we kind of had some ideas about why that was. So the Amos Bursary was formed, and it's very much about supporting young black men of African Caribbean heritage. It's about aspiration, it's about giving back, it's about giving them the skills to succeed at university and beyond. We started with 7 young men, and we now have 90-something, and they are wonderful. We've had students at Cambridge, at Oxford, at UCL. We have managed to get scholarships, they get mentoring, they get international experiences, including in New York, Belize, the Gambia, and elsewhere, and it's really grown. The moving force behind all of this is my sister, who is here in the room, trying to hide away. And of course, it's very much, it feels like a family charity. It's full of volunteers, and I think that family atmosphere really helps the young men. We've just had our Beyond Outstanding weekend conference, which we do once a year. And to see the young men stand up and talk about, you know, what they've achieved and how they've done it. And, you know, they come from some pretty difficult backgrounds sometimes. And we had one young man who managed to get a place at Harvard, but had to raise a lot of money, £70,000 for that year, and he managed to do it. So he'll be going to Harvard for a year, so I'm incredibly proud of him. And Jaladi, who's filming right here, is an Amos Bursary student, and is giving back, you know, having been one of our very successful students.
From Hackney, just saying. Now, it's something that we're all very proud of. A number of people in the room work and volunteer within this sport, including myself. So, the idyllic childhood in Guyana.
Well, I mean, idyllic in the sense that you look back and it's idyllic. I mean, it's like any childhood. You know, good bits, not so good bits. But I do think that, you know, I worry about what's happened if you're having to bring up children in London, where we're worried about safety, we're worried about, you know, security, we're worried about drugs, alcohol, the internet, you know, a whole range of things that young people now have to go through. And of course we had challenges, but not nearly, I think, to that extent. And also to be in a society that doesn't necessarily accept you even after all of this time, I think it brings additional pressures and burdens. So in that sense, you know, I look back and I think that the foundation that we got in Guyana was so important for us, and it's really stood me in very good stead.
Talking about coming here, we've all heard about the strains and the emotional pressure that Diana has been under. What about yourself? What is it? Who do you turn to? How do you get through the day? It must be even worse for you, to be quite honest.
Well, it is hard sometimes, but I've had a huge amount of support. I mean, my family is very, very important to me, and what they do is keep your feet very firmly on the ground. So I remember my niece once saying, "You may be Baroness Amos, but you're my auntie." And that, you know, that sense that you're part of a family, you know, a family that, you know, teases you, loves you, you know, makes sure that you don't get too big for your boots. I mean, all of that is wonderful, and I have a wonderful group of friends who do the same thing. So that sense of security and love is very important to me. But I also have a huge amount of support. I mean, you know, people will write to me, will email me, will see me in the street and tell me how proud they are of me, and you know, it's wonderful. You talk up a bit too.
What is it about it? We keep hearing about this Guyanese mafia. Someone mentioned it, and everyone giggles at it, but we sort of instinctively think, yeah, it's true. What do you think?
Well, the phrase was coined by Prince Charles, who is very proud to own it, I have to say. And it was at a time when you had me in the House of Lords, you had David Lammy in Parliament, his own head of communications, Colin Harris, Trevor Phillips. So there was a sense, and also because Guyana is not that well known, so people kept saying, well, who are these people from Guyana? Where have they come from? So he coined this phrase, the Guyanese mafia.
And what do you think it means?
I think for him it meant that there were a group of people who were exercising a degree of influence who happened to have roots in a particular place.
And more educated than others?
I don't think that he was necessarily thinking about it in that sense in terms of education. I think he was thinking about it in terms of people in certain positions in Britain who were born in Guyana or had links to Guyana. I think that's how he was thinking about it. So very much about influence.
And what about you yourself? Do you think of yourself as Guyanese? Do you think of yourself as British?
All of those. I think of myself as Guyanese, very much so. I think about myself as British. I mean, I've been here since I was 9 years old. But I also think of myself as Caribbean in terms of culture. And I also think about myself as African. And I kind of value all of those elements of who I am and what I'm about.
So there we are, two very strong Guyanese women in Britain. I've asked Jerry, maybe we should show this again later on for the latecomers. Those who want to know more about the Guyanese Mafia, I'm doing a paper at 10:15 that will actually name the guilty men in that. One of the lessons from these two is that the diaspora is not black, it's not brown, it's white, Chinese, putty, the whole lot. You have to recognise that. In a small country like England, where the diaspora is only 20,000 people, we by and large mix well. But I'll leave you with that, and hopefully you'll be able to see it later on. And I'm trying to get it onto Guyanese television as well. And apologies for the traffic in the background. Those of you of a certain age who went to QC will know Ian Wishart. Any Ian Wishart contemporaries here? No, and Ian Wishart sat by the window on a hot summer's day and opened the window and wouldn't shut it. He's an old way Guyanese himself. Alas. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. Let's give John a round of applause for. Anyone who came after we started will have missed it. We're not going to replay it, but we're going to put it on the web, both the conference website and the university website. Let me, before introducing Paul, UG Ambassador Paul Tennessee, who will introduce our keynote speaker, make a few observations. The first observation is to thank you for a very successful first full day of the conference. As of last night, we had 259 people registered, and there are others who are coming today, and some are coming tomorrow for the investiture and the closing plenary and the cultural extravaganza. I want to encourage those of you who have not as yet had a chance, if you have an interest in going on one of the tours. Some of the tours have limited spots, and some of the tours have minimum numbers to be able to go. So if you are interested, please do so. I want to also encourage you to support our merchandising efforts. One of the realities of our university is that as we come into our fullness as a mature institution, we've got to adopt both for merchandising finance and for merchandising branding. We've got to have merchandise. We don't have a lot of money, but we started with a few products, some of which are on their way from China. So before you leave, buy a t-shirt, even if you don't like the color. Before you leave, buy a hat, even if you want to give it to your nephew or niece. Find a way to support our merchandising efforts. Later on today will arrive some polo shirts. Price differential a little more than the t-shirts, but buy a polo shirt. Take to someone if you're from out of Guyana, or to someone in Guyana if you are someplace out of Georgetown. Finally, I want to say a little bit about tonight's dinner and the business dinner tomorrow night. There are many people who will have been leaving before the dinner tomorrow night. We want to get as accurate account, particularly for tomorrow night's business dinner, which is being sponsored by Go Invest, the Ministry of Business. So sometime during today, please go to the Secretariat and check your name if you'll be there for the business dinner. We're going to ask in the panels that we remind people, we want you to say yes against your name or no, so that we can have an accurate count for the business dinner. A reminder that the business dinner in particular and the dinner tonight, as are the sessions of the conference, except welcome reception and opening ceremony, are registered participants only. The cultural extravaganza also. So some of us have friends, encourage them to register if they want to come to the dinner. The cultural extravaganza is for everyone as well. So you can feel free to bring someone to the cultural extravaganza, but we have a strict policy of wanting to match registration with the dinners in particular. It's my pleasure now to invite Paul Tennessee, and Paul was one of our initial University of Guyana ambassadors. Paul will introduce our keynote speaker. Round of applause for Paul.
Good morning, folks. I hope you had a good night's rest. It is with great pleasure that I have to introduce a very special patriot and Guyanese.
And Tony should use the podium.
Oh, I should.
Put it for them.
Testing? Okay, great. Good morning again. I hope you had a very good night's sleep. It is with great pleasure and a great honor to introduce this Guyanese patriot and successful entrepreneur. You know, I have found going through the country that a lot of our young people, the millennials, when you talk to them about entrepreneurs and about role models, they tell you about Bill Gates and they tell you about American entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things we have to do in this country is for our people to become more familiarized with our own. And I think the institute I'm leading, the Roraima Institute, is seriously contemplating preparing a book with about 12 successful Guyanese entrepreneurs so that our young people can have an example of a role model. And one of those people who definitely, if something is written about entrepreneurs in Guyana, has to be Mr. Glenn Khan, the chairman of the Parkin Group of Companies. Now we talk about Guyanese at home and Guyanese abroad, and we talk about building bridges between Guyanese at home and Guyanese abroad. But from time when Guyanese in the 70s started to migrate to the north, which was a household word, La Parkin, La Parkin, La Parkin. That's how we got the barrels. Is that so? La Parkin. Everybody knows La Parkin. So it's Mr. Khan is the chairman and chief executive officer. He's a certified accountant, entrepreneur, and philanthropist whose vision and business acumen combined with his spirit of assisting the less fortunate places him among the most reputable and successful business persons in the English-speaking Caribbean and its diaspora in the post-colonial period. Guyana will only make the leap from a commodities economy into a developed economy if and only we can multiply the Glen Khans in this country. This is our challenge and our reality. Before I call on our guest speaker, our feature speaker, our keynote speaker, to come to the podium, I'd like to make an appeal to him on behalf of the University in Guyana and the young aspirants of this country to become entrepreneurs, that if he can engage the new school of entrepreneurship and business on innovation that our Vice Chancellor has taken the initiative to launch quite recently. They need a lot of help, and I am